I'm Monihan speaking with the two members of Daft Punk with Guy and Thomas. We are going to be doing this little recording for Scion Radio 17 guest spot and Vice podcast. We're going to start going back a little ways and just talk about what it was like, the sort of cultural climate in France when you guys started doing music. We know that you guys started out doing different type of music, doing indie stuff in a band called Darlin. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background and what got you into music in the first place and doing something a little bit different from what you're doing now.
The way we got into music is pretty much the very common way, like many teenagers when they want to start a band and in a very common yet with a feeling of contestation of the previous generation and wanting to do something different, but it was really something at the time. We were 17 and we just wanted to have a rock band like anybody, and so that's how Darlin came about, and the band itself didn't last long. So the single was released, and by the time it was released, it got bad reviews, and at the same time, I think we were already discovering electronic music and house music, and finding a different energy that we would decide to embrace a few months later.
It seemed like you had a desire to try to do something completely different from what was going on in the scene at the time. Was this like a conscious thing to, like you said, try to do something that this just wasn't on the landscape at all at that time, or was it just pure experimentation and it's just what you came up with?
And at that time, it was still very experimental and very confidential. So we turning 17 or 18, we discovered the ability to go into clubs and went into some raves and discovered a very energetic movement compared to the very stiff rock audiences that at the time, where we loved a lot of bands and were going to a lot of shows, but it seems that everybody was so afraid to move in the audience that we felt there was really a great energy in the clubs and in this music where people were dancing and appreciating music, which they sometimes didn't know which song was playing and which beats and stuff. So then we got in touch with the Scottish label that put out our music. So not in France initially, and really at that time in 93 or 94, we were not expecting that any of what we were going to do would change the musical landscape of the French music at the time, rather than maybe after touring in many raves and doing a lot of underground live shows in 95 and 96, and working, it's true, on an album at the time and signed in 96, early 96 and late 95. It turned out that we were going to sign with a major label record at the time, and that the record was going to come out in France and Europe and in most of the countries in the world.
Can you tell us what it was like at that period of time for you guys, being on a major label and having your stuff exported to outside of France?
Yeah, it was very surprising because we didn't expect any of that to happen. But at the same time, I think we were always cautious about trends and the next big things, because indeed it was the next big thing or the hip of the moment. But like any hip or any trend, it only lasts 2, 3, 4 years maximum, and it's always been the case. So there was definitely coming out of a very hyped up movement, especially around the release of a second single, Daft Punk and Rolling and Scratching, which really triggered things to snowball at a higher rate. We want to make sure that trying to stay away from categories or labels and of that the media or the people would create, and in order to really focus on what we want to achieve and working really on a day-to-day basis. But it's true that today, 15 years later, since the beginning of Daft Punk, in a few months, we really feel fortunate to have gone past through these waves of trends and especially in that environment where it's so as genres and the next big label or the next underground thing or the next sound, French Touch and Speed Garage and Electro Clash and all these things, they last for 2 or 3 years max, and then you move to the next thing.
And why do you feel like you've been able to sort of transcend that?
It's really hard for us to understand why it lasted and transcended through these waves. The only thing maybe is that it's true that from the start our approach has been really a global from a creative standpoint and not just purely musical, and people, maybe it took a little bit of time for people to understand that and thinking that it was maybe music with some people would see it maybe with music with a very clever marketing around or something like that, but it was not that at all, and we really focused on expressing ourselves and expanding this creation from music and tracks and then working on DVD or different music videos at the time, or a Japanese animation film, or a film, or a tour, and with all of these elements being as important or a full part of what we're doing, and not just about it's 15 years down the line we've done 3 albums and our studio albums and that's it, and looking at all of these elements and taking the time to work on all these different sides of the project, because it's really in this combination of all these art forms, and that we thought that there was an opportunity for us to express something that would maybe go beyond a musical trend.
Was this a conscious decision to include all these other mediums to sort of, for lack of a better way of explaining it, but make you feel a little bit more well-rounded and more like it's not just, create another record, put it out, see what happens?
It's a conscious decision because it's our creative impulse and it's our personality. So it was if either working on myself on the cinematography of the movie and really studying that and working on that is it's indeed a deliberate choices and where you prioritize as an artist what you want to express, but mainly maybe for us in a very personal way, what did we want to learn about, and it's funny, but it's been from a personal point of view, sometimes it's like it's been this kind of internship into whether how do you make a Japanese animation, or how do you work with special effects and to transform yourself into a robot, and many of these things we're kind of curious and enthusiastic about understanding these processes, and has been just as exciting for us, and sometimes more than just saying we're just going to stay in the studio and have people handle all of these things. So we define ourselves probably more as artists and that are working and getting influences from many different things in culture and popular culture, and sometimes very obscure things, sometimes very mainstream things, rather than musicians.
Obviously, the visual element and the theatrical element of a live show, coincide with music pretty easily. But like, say for instance, I'm sure you have interests that may not seem like a perfect fit to go along with the music. Is it something that you'll just do because you have the leverage or the ability to do it now, or is it something that you have to think that's in working with the music?
I don't think as an artist, especially everything is pretty hands-on and to a very small scale. Even if we were very fortunate to have a lot of things that we did highly exposed, but we there was not a time where we started to gain more leverage or exposure or even control over what we did, rather than learning that it's from the start that you have you take the liberty to have leverage or not. And that's really important thing, because some people really think that it's once you're established that you're going to have control. But if you've been if you ended up being established without having control, the system is never going to give you control at a certain time down the line. When we signed our record company with our record company at the time, we decided to pretty much put all the money we had into the first music video, or all these advances into that Spike Jonze did, all these things. And it's not and it may be trigger things and more project and more things, but not in a way that okay, now we can do that now, and we can do it in the beginning. So
you weren't waiting for some safety zone or something.
No. And after, I think we've only been trying to keep on take risks, because this is what's exciting, and not trying to fill an existing place, rather than expanding it with trying different things, and sometimes more or less appealing maybe to the people, but appealing to ourselves for sure.
So appealing to yourself, your own sensibilities of what you like, that comes first with everything you do.
Yes, it's a very selfish yet respectful. It's the way we found the most respectful and full of integrity relationship we can have to an audience, especially because the relationship is quite abstract in our case. So we're only trying to do things that we find exciting and interesting, and then we share it with the audience. And we give the audience the complete freedom to either appreciating it or not.
Is it a confidence feeling that because you like it, that there's going to definitely be people out there that are going to feel the same? Or does that not even come into the equation?
There's no confidence at all. I think maybe if you do it, you can do it from a subtractive way. If it's at least maybe we can say the opposite is, at least if we like it, at least there's like 2% that likes it, but and it would be stupid to try to please someone else than yourself, because if you're not the one, we the only thing we hold on to in these creative processes are our own excitement or our own beliefs in what we've done when we've done it, and it's selfish, yet we feel it's the most respectful way of a potential audience to do so. But we don't know, and it's always surprising to see if people are going to appreciate what we've done or not.
Well, I mean, when you started with the band, you were having other people direct your first videos. Was this something that you always had the intention of wanting to do yourselves?
I think we wanted from the beginning, but we didn't decide to. I think we took the time to learn from others, and it took a lot of years. But step by step, project by project, we stayed maybe a little bit behind, and we tried to learn from Spike Jonze. I remember really well the first meeting we had with him, and how much we were impressed by what he did and stuff. and since then we step by step, little by little, we tried to build a wall, to build to learn, and then Electroma came after having done the videos for Human After All. But it was when we met, we were like 12 and 13, and for the first 4 years we were friends. We only went to movies and stuff, and looking at videotapes, and we never did music for the first years. It's after that we had separate bands, and then ultimately we made music together. The first love was movies and cult movies in general. So it was something, as we've always been, at the same time as being friends, we were really creative. There was a lot of creativity in our friendship. So doing one day one movie was an idea that we didn't even talk about, but that was obvious. And so Electroma is the first movie, but we started even. I told Thomas the other day, my father has got a tape of us when we were 12, and where we did our first music video, and so the collaboration and maybe the movie side or visual side started long before making music together. We started even when we met. In fact, the creative process started when we saw maybe our first movie, or when we talked for the first time. It was just let's go to the movies, let's do something, and after that we started talking about creating some stuff.
And did you always have similar opinions?
I think we built all this stuff in opposition of what all the kids in our class were doing or listening to, which was more passive, And us in the college where we were, in the school where we were, we wanted to maybe, as many people do a band, kids do a band, we wanted to do something different than just listening to the charts, or even at the time MTV was new, but that was the only way to look at stuff. So we tried to dig into music, to dig into movies, and maybe to not to be different, but to be more active, to find some. When you find a good movie like Phantom of Paradise when you're 12 and your friends are watching just Back to the Future, you feel like you found something really interesting or a treasure. And when you see that you can, even before internet, dig a little bit more into music and movies and everything, you keep on doing it, and so you get. I think we got our education, like artistic education in a way, together, and so now we are really on the same wavelengths, and even at the time too, because we discovered everything together.
Now, like, you're describing something that's very important, that seems like it's something that's fading from our culture now, which is the ability to go and find something that's unique, that stands out from everybody else. And now with the internet, it seems like everybody's able to go and find something that's obscure or whatever. And
I think, funnily enough, it's true that's when I think one of what attracted us in doing this first film as an experimental kind of midnight movie, and in a very strange, hypnotic, psychedelic, contemplative way, and because it felt at some point, and we've always tried to express ourselves in different ways, but it felt like maybe there's almost a crave for redefining what the underground is really, and it's true that internet has made the underground inexistent, because it's not only the counterculture and underground has gone overground, and in many artistically it's for the better, but from a socially and a point of how as a teenager you identify yourself and you make yourself different from other people, it's becoming quite paradoxical and problematic, and we felt that maybe doing a weird science fiction contemplative silent film like that in a way is more underground making electronic music, and it doesn't distance us from wanting to do both. But it's funny to see today in the culture what can still be considered more or less non-accessible, and what is not accessible is then still exciting, and just from the fact of it's going to a movie theater at midnight and meeting like 50 strangers or 100 and 200 people there is some things that tended to exist in the 60s or 70s. Then they disappeared with a videotape, and then maybe they can re-happen in different scenarios.
When you're making a film like what you've just made, and you have aspirations for it to have this sort of midnight film kind of cult experience thing, bringing back this kind of community experience, does that interest you with the medium of film? Is that something that you were thinking about?
For this film, yes. I think what we found interesting there was trying to have the same initial contact with the technique and the technology that we had with music or electronic music, which was we'd never been to music engineering school or anything like that, and try to handle the technique and the technology and trying to express something powerful musically, as we did with our first record, and experimenting with things and being inspired either by rock influences or disco or funk and working with frequencies and noise and textures. And here for this film it was really the idea of trying to do the same thing visually, which almost working in an abstract way, as well as thinking about an audience or an image that would be projected in front of an audience on a big screen, but in a very experimental and very minimal way. And it was working with minimalism at the same time. So it's true we didn't think about the film initially about watching it on a small screen or rather than almost as a social thing. And I think it triggered, the idea started when we after watching the Interstellar, the film we had made in Japan, and looking at all these people inside a theater, watching it and saying, wow, there's like many things that haven't been done within the context of a theater, and it was less about trying to do a good film on top of all the magnificent film that have been made, rather than saying, if we look at the theatrical experience of just you have a 35mm projector or a digital projector and people in a room with a surround sound system, what can you do that hasn't been done? And whether you get inspiration from psychedelia or from paintings or surrealism or different things like that.
One of the goals in the film, or one of the things that was driving it, was the idea that there's no actors in the film. The actor is the audience. The actor is the participation of the people viewing the film. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's working on a film that would pretty much be an environment where everything is part of the environment, and these robots are almost because the characters are robots, and in a way they're machines, so they're not human, and there is almost no story, no script, or it would be a film where you take all of the element of what's inside a film, and in fact the actor as the only human being is the audience, and at the same time it's the audience that wanders through this environment. And a little bit like in surrealism, the absurdity or the lack of logic makes, like when you look at Magritte painting, for example, makes the viewer very active in trying to put the numbers or try to put some kind of logic, whether it's pure logic or it's an emotion or it's a feeling or try to imprint instinctively emotions or some kind of order. That's how the brain functions, and we thought it was exciting because we would try to just put this environment a little bit like what you can find sometimes in video games, and it was pretty much the same idea about finding an environment around getting into an experience and not really knowing what's happening to you, and obviously what's happening is not really a regular film experience.
But it seems like there must be other influences more on the philosophical side of creating a situation where the audience has to be confronted with something.
I think the most, there must have been many influences, but the most obvious was paintings and maybe the feeling that you can have in some paintings and surrealist paintings, probably more like someone like Magritte, and maybe in other surrealist painters, or Dali, or maybe some Buñuel films, or the idea of when you make two things collide, and there's a feeling that gets out of it, especially when there's a sense of absurdity or lack of logic. We thought that it was interesting to understand how these things would still trigger an emotion or a feeling and working with verbal elements. So, and I think it was really the idea of it was this idea about two things also, which was in our personal experiences, the experience of the film itself, which is something, and then the memory of the experience of the film, which for many movies that we liked, or cult films, which is very different and very interesting, which is the sense to what extent the experience of the film is something. It's like a book. Sometimes it's and then the memory you have and what it leaves on your the persistence of some images has a completely different effect than the moment you see it. And it's true that it seems that now more and more films are made on the instant experience of it, during the effect that the film has while you watch it, and then there's nothing after that. Whereas we were trying to see what kind of things could the film leave as either images or impressions or emotions, and the effect of it, the mid-term to long-term effect, rather than the instant one.
You constantly seem to be like saying, wouldn't it be cool if we sort of said we can only do this, or try to experiment with an idea where we, for the film, no dialogue, for this album only using these certain instruments. What is it about taking that approach that interests you so much?
Probably, I think we live at a time where there's more and more technology available and more tools available, and it just becomes impossible to really establish just even the limit of a canvas. It's as if painters now would have this kind of canvas where it's infinite. So you have the infinite. You can have millions of colors available, and the area of your canvas could be completely endless. So it used to be technology and the tools that were dictating the limits of how you can express yourself, and there was no limits in the imagination itself. But now that there is no limits technically, it's very hard to combine this kind of no limit in technical and no limit in the imagination. So we tend to it's like if you say, okay, I want to write a story, and I'm just gonna use a pencil to write this book, and in fact we most of the time try to limit the tools in order to focus on the content, rather than to use any kind of tools, and then it's really hard to stick and to a precise idea, rather than to get lost into technology.
Just to sort of wrap things up, what other mediums would you guys like to explore next? Is there anything that you want to beyond film and beyond music?
Many things interest us. I think the interesting thing here is at our time is that there's an ability nowadays, especially to not only express ourselves using all these existing formats and that are set and wanting to try all of these, rather than the ability today to custom make and to create these formats and create new formats, and where the not only the substance is interesting, but all these new forms and ways of expressing ourselves, and for artists to express themselves artistically with really new opportunities, because most of the established format were created before this kind of technological revolution and internet, and were really linked to the industrial revolution and the mechanical reproduction and these kind of buffers between physical buffers between the artists or the creators and the audience. And now that there seems to be a very fluid and direct access, and all these new channels, and there's really an opportunity to create and to invent the art forms themselves, almost like an open source environment where everything, not only the stories are to be invented, but the tools themselves have to be created, and the environment and the context and the relationship between the the artist and the audiences have to be invented. And because the record industry is almost dead and has kind of self-destructed, and if you look at this story of music and the economy of music for the last 400 or 500 years, this thing will have lasted for a few decades, and before it was a completely different relationship between musicians and audiences, and I think a lot of things are going to still happen in cinema and films. I mean, and at the same time in art, people don't build cathedrals anymore in 150 years. So a lot of things that have been done and that even were done right now, I think, are going to disappear. But art and music and stories and storytelling and audiences and artists have always been there, and it's really exciting to see that as many setups or opportunities are disappearing, 10 times more are appearing or are yet to be discovered, and it's exciting to feel that there are things to be discovered, because sometimes the problem of an artist is feeling that everything has been done and that there's nothing left to do, and sometimes it's been the case within the formats, but here it's really open-ended. So it's that's what's exciting to us.
So thank you very much, Guy and Thomas.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that's it for Scion Radio 17 guest spot and the Vice podcast.
Thank
Goodbye.
you. Goodbye.